Happy Monday, everybody, or should I say sad Monday?
No, it's not happy. I mean, they tell me I got to smile more, but come on.
I
You
don't.
gonna smile after this nonsense?
No, we're not going to smile after this
We're
nonsense.
mad. Dude's mad.
Dude's mad. This week on Ask Mike, it's the ranting session. That's what I'm going to call it after Arkansas baseball season is no longer. So we're going to get right into that. Our first question is from Mousetown, who asks, okay, you tell me what went wrong with the baseball team. Were they overrated to begin with? Was there too much hype?
Okay, overrated. I mean, probably, but the thing is, at one point, I think they were 20-2. They were 11-1 in the SEC. When you start off like that, why are you not going to be number one? And if you are number one, why would you not be hyped? I mean, you got to hype that. Fans were hyping it themselves. It wasn't just the media. So, yeah, if you look back on it, the schedule, we now know the schedule was easier at the first of the year, and when they got into the latter part of the SEC, they were playing some of the better teams. They went on the road and lost a series, their first series to Alabama. Alabama wasn't that good, but they made a regional field, and Alabama's always a team that's given Arkansas grief. They just always have been. So things started to normalize a little bit then. So you had that issue, but there were also things. We knew that this team was inconsistent at the plate. They were good at times, and times they weren't good. I personally think that this team had too many strikeout type pitchers. When that's all you've got, when you sit there and every at bat is whether or not you can strike a guy out, because it's like they're either going to get a base hit, you're going to walk them, you're going to hit them, or you're going to strike them out, and there's no other options. And you watch other teams, and it's pretty simple. Ground ball to the shortstop, ground ball to the second baseman, fly ball to the center field. You want to see some of that, and you didn't. And Dave Van Horn talked about that kind of stuff wears on you a little bit, especially with the close games they had. They won all those games, but a lot of them were low-scoring games, and they did have to have enough offense to come from behind. You're down 3-2, and you end up winning 4-3 or 5-3. It puts pressure on you. Puts pressure on everybody, and he thinks that maybe they kind of got toward the end of the season and they were emotionally worn down. And then the other thing, when you ask what went wrong, I plead guilty to this. I sat here a week ago, I had looked at the regional field, and it was quick at this point because I only had about an hour to look at all those teams and we had to talk about it. But what did I say? I said that they caught a break with Louisiana Tech. It wasn't like TCU. I said they got to worry about SEMO because of all the home runs, so you can't take them lightly. But I thought Kansas State was the weakest team in the regional. Boy, was I a dummy. I mean, I didn't see this coming. I mean, come on, those guys weren't that good.
No.
There was nothing that in their resume coming into this regional that would suggest what they did.
Especially at the end of the season. They weren't coming in on a hot streak or anything. There were Kansas State fans that even said that. I still don't know what happened for sure. Because if Kansas State goes to Virginia and gets wiped out, then I'm going to be back at this point where I'm saying, look, Arkansas laid an egg. But if they get to Omaha, then maybe you think, well, everybody overlooked them. So it's still not exactly clear what went wrong. The only thing that's clear is that this was a big thud, and it's like a black hole today because nobody knows what to do. I mean, everybody was expecting us to be talking about baseball for a week or two more, and now we don't have that. And nobody's really ready to talk about football yet. So I guess it just turns everything over to track and field this weekend, right? Yeah, I mean, they're still competing for an outdoor national title. So hey, you can be track and field fans now. I know a lot of people on social media are kind of in this limbo stage because Alyssa made this point to me the other day. I go, do they watch the rest of the NCAA baseball tournament? And she was kind of like, well, once your team's out, there's not that much interest.
I will do it because it's my job, but I don't think most fans care.
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question for people out there. Are you watching the NCAA
I don't think most of
baseball
them
tournament?
will. I don't think most of them will.
I don't think so
If you're
either.
a real hardcore baseball fan, you will. If you're somebody like me where it's your job, but other than that, why?
Well, especially, it's different than the NCAA basketball tournament because you care still after your team is out with the bracket challenge and making sure your bracket is still good. And a lot of people do that. So, again,
I don't know. Let us know what you're doing now. We have more baseball to talk about, though. Mark Modisette says 33-3 at home this season and 1-2 in the regional.
What did I say a week ago? I said they're going to win this regional, Arkansas, because they haven't lost 2 games in a weekend, and there's not a team that's going to beat them twice in a weekend. Well, there wasn't a team that beat them
There
twice.
wasn't.
There were 2 teams that beat them, but they still added up to 2 losses.
Yeah.
And so that's the shock. And I still can't believe it. But I also can't believe that Hagen Smith gave up 6 runs in 1 inning. What happened there? And we can go round and round about that. I was talking to Phil Elson about this. Maybe it was just a fluke, crazy thing. They did get that one crazy hit, then the bunt, and he walked a guy, and then you get this home run that you don't expect. Maybe that's a thing that happens once in a whole season. I mean, if you go back, at one point Hagen Smith was 9-0 and the lowest ERA in the country. His ERA has now jumped a whole run because of that one game. He's still probably going to go high in the draft, but maybe it took a little bit of a hit. But what happened there? I don't know that we're ever going to know for sure. But that figure, 33-3, and then in this weekend you go 1-2. I would have never thought that.
I like what you said earlier today and even yesterday about the pressure. There's a lot of pressure that was on specifically Hagen Smith going into the season throughout the season.
He's being compared to Paul Skeens the whole year.
Yeah.
They're putting up those stats every game.
Every
Skeens at this
single
point
game.
was this. Here's Hagen Smith. He's better. And you're just going, whoa, you keep doing that.
Yeah.
And the announcers are talking about all this stuff. And maybe he's trying to live up to that. But I think what affected him more was he didn't just want to be the best pitcher in college baseball. He wanted to be the best pitcher on the best team. And when he saw this team going in the other direction, it got to him a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that may have been part of what was going on. He was an Arkansas guy. He wanted to win.
Yeah.
He didn't just want to win his games. He wanted Arkansas to win and get to Omaha and win the whole thing.
Well, think about his bad games this season, and one of them was in that opening series to JMU. And you think about that game, there was all that preseason pressure that was put on him.
Got to him
and
a
I
little
think
bit.
it got to him a little bit there. And then you think about the end of the year, right, where it's the postseason pressure. And so I'm not saying that maybe it got to him a lot, but you can kind of see where.
I think it was more emotional than certainly not physical.
Exactly.
I think Dave Van Horn said some of those other guys, it was their arms got arm weary. This is another thing I'm talking about with strikeout pitchers.
Yeah.
They tend to throw more pitches. Pitch to contact, boom, 2 pitches in, bouncer to the shortstop.
Yeah.
Next guy gets up, hits a fly ball on the first pitch to center field. Sometimes you can be out of an inning in 4 pitches.
Exactly. Yeah, much more efficient.
You can't
that
strike
way.
3 guys out with 4 pitches.
Yeah, exactly. Razor Alex 88 asks, what would you suggest to remedy the woes of our baseball teams hitting too many Ks and men left stranded this baseball season?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is what Dave Van Horn addressed. So it will make maybe some fans happy that he did address this issue. And he basically said that they had already started to try to change their hitting philosophy last year with the 2024 recruiting class, which was last spring or last year. And so those guys would come in, in the fall and go through fall ball. And he said, we had 4 guys that we had all signed. Every one of them was a hitter of doubles and singles with speed. They were athletic. We wanted guys that could run the bases. We wanted guys that can bunt. We want a guy that can go from first to home on a double. We wanted guys that could go from first to third on a single, if it's in the right place. We want guys with speed. We want to make contact. We're not. He said, I didn't want these hulked up home run hitters, but he said, we got 4 of them, and we lost every one of them in the draft. He said those 4 guys got a total of $7 million to sign, and he said it wiped us out. So he said, we're going to try it again. But I got the impression this time it's not going to be done through freshmen, because he's talking about wanting older teams anyway in reaction to what SEMO was, which was an older team, 24, 25-year-old guys. And I think he will go into the portal and try to find these athletic type
speed hitters, guys that are speed base runners, and guys that hit singles and doubles, not necessarily home runs.
Absolutely. I love what he said. We don't need 8 guys who are hitting homers all the time. He's like, I like homers, I like doubles, but we need guys who can run. Like we're saying, we need athletes. And so I think you're right there. You want to get those athletes, but you also want to have the experience and the age, because that is so beneficial during this time. You saw what happened with SEMA. I think they had a 26-year-old on their roster, Mike. I mean, they just have these athletes that probably should be playing in the minor leagues, but they're on there playing still college baseball. And that's the interesting thing that we've got into, even with Coach Cal, talking about how old these teams are now versus years ago. So it's a whole other conversation we could go on for hours about. Eddie Lynn wants to know, is Dave Van Horn finally going to change the hitting coach, or will it be more of the same old guys trying to hit home runs every at-bat?
There are rumors that Nate Thompson might get a head coaching job. That I certainly haven't heard anything yet to indicate that's happening. He did address this a little bit in that he said something to the effect that Nate Thompson really believes in his philosophy, but he also understands we've got to change it some. And then he went into what we've just talked about. So whether or not Nate Thompson is here next year, and I think right now I'd say probably will be back, but whether or not he's here or not, I think there's going to be a change. I think that's what this is what Dave Van Horn is saying, that I hear you, I understand, I knew about this last year, I tried to do something about it and the draft wiped me out, but we're going to get this done.
He didn't sound, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you listen to that answer, a lot of people were going, oh, he's backing down on, he's doubling down on Nate Thompson. I said, I don't think so. What is he going to say? Is he going to go up there and go, yeah, I'm going to fire him? Or, no, he's not going to say any of those things in a press conference.
He was saying we're going to change.
It sounded like that. And so that's what I was going to say. I mean, there is going to be some changes. Do you think Nate Thompson could be gone next year just out of the basis of maybe a head coaching job?
I mean, I'm sitting there in that media area at during the regional. It's over at the Dyson track, and they have a place where they feed the media, and they sit in these tables. And I was sitting at one of these tables with a bunch of media people, and they seemed to think that it could happen. But I just haven't heard anything definite on that. So right now, I'd say I think he'll probably be back. But if he's not, it'll be a surprise. And then what they were saying is they thought Van Horn would go after SEMO's hitting coach because of the way they sort of do the pitch to contact stuff and hit and older guys and all this stuff. But Kansas State does that too.
Yeah,
I mean, they move their guys around pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see who they would go after. I think that would be a conversation.
Contact hitters, not pitch to contact, but contact hitters.
Yeah, exactly. And it'd be interesting to see who they go after. Obviously, we're not in that situation right now, but if he did go and get a head coaching job, I'd be interested to see.
Yeah, because it's not just if Nate Thompson left. Is who do you replace him with?
Yeah, that's my question. Is who do you replace him with? I'm sure the fans have
I will add that there are a couple of people, one on the internet, but there's somebody in the media that did this too. They apparently did a study on Arkansas's hitting under Nate Thompson. This was his 7th year, and compared it to Vitello, that everybody's saying Vitello's the hitting coach, the guru. And his numbers, Arkansas's numbers are better under Nate Thompson than Vitello. So
yeah, there's some food for thought there for everybody, and trying to get that out there. KY Hogg says, I'm all hog living in Kentucky, but this team was such a disappointment. I really don't care if any of these guys come back. Wow, Van Horn should do what Calipari did, build an entirely new team for next season.
Yeah, that's kind of an anger reaction thing, because if he's really serious about that, and I'm pretty sure he's probably not, it's a lot different replacing 9 guys on a basketball roster, and you need about 30 in baseball at minimum. So that would be more difficult. But along those lines, Van Horn also said that he expects to pretty much have to rebuild his roster next year, at least from the starter standpoint. He talked about having an entirely new outfield. He said he's probably going to lose a lot of his infield. He might have one catcher back, which would be Helfrich, but he's probably going to have to sign a couple of transfer guys at catcher, or maybe he'll try to get a freshman. I don't know. But he said we expect to have to rebuild. So if you don't want these guys back, look, I don't think it's him running them off. I think a lot of them will probably realize Guys like Hudson White, I had somebody tell me, oh, he's not going to get drafted. Well, I think he will. I think he had a good enough year. Somebody, it might be late rounds, but most guys, when they get to this point in their career and they face, do I come back? Then you're out of options if you come back the next year. Even if you have a good year, they can offer you whatever they want to offer you.
Yeah.
And the number usually goes down. So most guys will go, if they've got an ability to play minor league baseball with hopes of maybe making it in the majors, they'll make that move their junior year or their fourth year of eligibility even if they have one more year left.
And I think something to think about as well is as a business decision for these guys, because you have NIL as a factor in why these guys want to stay. And, I don't know what Arkansas baseball's NIL situation looks like right now versus other programs, but I know based on what some people have told us that they're needing money. And if you go to any of those Swatters Club meetings, you have Dave Van Horn get up there and go, yeah, we need money still, guys. NIL is a thing, okay? We need money. So I think that's a factor too. Can they make more money someplace staying in college versus going into the draft and being drafted by a team as well? That is a consideration for those guys. Hog Redneck says, I wonder where all those don't worry, everything is fine fans are now. I got so tired of reading about this game doesn't matter. Hoover doesn't matter. It mattered.
Here's where I agree with that. And I understood the philosophy of Van Horn, and I understood some of the fans that agreed with him. But in my thinking, once they reached the Kentucky series, they started losing more games than they were winning. When you had the kind of record this team had, and then all of a sudden, you're not only wildly successful, you're starting to lose more than you win, and you're heading toward the end of the season and postseason, you've got to do something to turn that around. So I don't think you have throwaway games. I understand the thought on that, but I still think you try to win the Sunday game at A&M, even though it doesn't change much. I still think you try to win in Hoover, even though it might not have anything to do with what happens in your regional. I think he worried too much about resting arms and not enough about, we got to get back into a winning mode, because sometimes when you're in a winning mode, you continue to win. When you get into a losing mode, you start losing.
It's all about that mindset, right, Mike Irwin? It's all about
even
that
if it's
mindset.
You're not even thinking about it, it can be a psychological effect.
Absolutely. And I think, let me just stand up for some of the people who were saying it doesn't matter. They weren't saying that losing the games doesn't matter. They were just saying that the whole thing, at least the fans I was talking to, were saying it doesn't matter as what it will be and how it will affect our seeding in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, well, but fine, but the seeding doesn't. I tell you what didn't matter, any of that stuff. What matters is what you do when you're in your regional.
True.
And again, because you've had these throwaway games where you didn't have to win, you get into a mindset, even if it's psychological and you're not thinking about it, where you're not winning anymore, you're losing.
Yeah, you're right. It affects definitely the mindset. I think it definitely didn't affect, and what we were talking about last week was where they got seeded and hosting a regional and doing all of that. So that's where to stand up, because I said it didn't matter too. I didn't mean it didn't matter in the losing.
Well, let's say they'd won at Hoover.
Okay.
They wouldn't have been a five seed. They'd probably
might have been.
No, I think they'd have been a 3
Oh,
if they'd won at Hoover.
All right.
And then if you're a 3, maybe you don't play these goobers that beat you. Maybe it's a different deal. You don't know.
Sure, maybe
I've
a
said
different
all
draw,
year long
maybe a...
that when the selection committee spins that wheel and you find out who you've got, you don't even know sometimes whether it's tough or easy.
Well, yeah, we certainly didn't know that Kansas State was going to come in here
we didn't know.
and get out of the regional, that's for sure. S. Giles says home regionals in 2021, 2023, and 2024, and none of those teams advanced to Omaha. In 2022, the road to Omaha took us through Stillwater and Chapel Hill, and we made it. Are we back to the old days where it's better not to host?
I don't know. Phil Elson talked about this a little bit, and everybody understands kind of the thought process here. With some teams, there is so much pressure to please your home fans in a regional with all those people in the stands. Maybe it is easier to be a Kansas State and come in here and be in a great environment, but you're not having to please anybody. You're just playing baseball. In the 2010s, Arkansas got into a kind of a mode where they would go to Waco and then go to the College World Series, or they would go to Norman and go to the College World Series, or Stillwater. So they did that. And the thought in those days, and Dave Van Horn said it during that time, I don't care if we host, because what I care about is going to Omaha, and if we have to do that at somebody else's place, that's fine. Here's the problem with that. When you got this fan base, you're rewarding them. The best games of the year, and a lot of times at home here, we have weird weather. It doesn't get warm until late in the conference season. You might only have 3 SEC series where you got a warm weather baseball type atmosphere. So you want to play those games, those regional and super regional games here, because it gives you that really cool atmosphere of 11,300 fans, and the weather's good, and it's not always good, but at least it's not cold, and you have baseball, and you're rewarding your fans for their support. When you start saying, well, we'll be better off going somewhere else, you're shortchanging your own fans. So I hope this is not where we're at. That's part of the frustration here. The fans expect you to host a regional, to win a regional, to go to Omaha. That's the standard here. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and hopefully host a super as well. Even if you host a regional, you hope that you host the supers as well, and that rewards the fan base even more for having those 2 weekends at home before Omaha. I think it goes back to pressure and mindset, like you're saying. The standards, and this team knows that, the standards of this program. And they know, because we talked to them before even going to the SEC tournament, where we sat down with Ben McLaughlin, and he says, I know when I came to Arkansas, the standards are so high. It's excellence or nothing. That's it. That's the standards. And so there is a lot of pressure that these 20-year-olds, these 21-year-olds, these 22-year-old guys are putting on themselves, because the standards here are so high, and that's great. I'm not saying, look, you don't want to be on the opposite end of that, but I do know that the pressure can sometimes be that maybe the guys feel a little less pressure going on the road. But you would think with a team that's 33-3 at home.
I don't want to get back into that mode where you have to go on the road.
I agree with you, Mike, but you think with a team that's 33-3 at home, 33-3 at home, that there isn't a lot of pressure playing here.
Well, I know that, but they had the Mississippi State series. They could have gotten swept.
They could have.
And they figured out a way to win that thing, because they were and then all of a sudden it wasn't here, and at the most important weekend of the season. So it's just,
we're still going to be scratching our heads about it, I think, for weeks to come. Marty Bird's Proxy wants to know, is DVH's support still as strong as ever? Are Hog fans starting to get antsy, sort of like Kentucky fans were with Cal? We're smarter than the latter, right?
I'm not sure that whole get rid of Cal thing was what we have the impression of. There were a lot of Kentucky fans that I think thought that was dumb, that they let him go, that they should have said, hey, we want you to stay. You know, Arkansas wants you. No, we'll commit to you.
There's a very small portion of the Kentucky fan base that was very outspoken about wanting Cal gone, but it was a very small portion.
Yeah, I don't think it was as widespread as some people think. So when we start talking about Vitello, I think the same thing. What I see on social media today is a lot more, we need to make some changes rather than we need to change the coach. There's only a few people doing that. So I think it's more Arkansas fans don't want him necessarily replaced. They just want him to change his hitting philosophy, which he said he's going to do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I posted a tweet, and it was a video of the fan base, you know, who was there after that loss to SEMO yesterday. The fan base that was still there got up and cheered DVH, very loud, and as he
those are your
loyalist,
most loyal fans, the ones that stayed there even though they knew they were about to lose.
Yeah, they were definitely loyal.
The crowd was down for that game. Some of those people were sending a message. We're not happy about the fact that you're in an elimination game this quick.
Yeah, but to the point of what you were saying, a lot of the fans on that video, there were a few that were calling, oh, why are they cheering for, there was a lot that were like, that's still our coach. We're still behind you. We still believe.
I don't think the majority of fans want him gone. It's just a fringe element. But probably the majority want him to make some changes.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's absolutely that. You can have both. You can have fans that want DVH to stay, but still want to see those changes happen. We're still talking about baseball here. WV Hawk fan says, the other day we saw Mississippi State players taunting Tennessee players. Which SEC teams, athletes, and coaches exhibit the worst sportsmanship? And which teams exhibit the best sportsmanship? I'm asking about the players and coaches, not the fans.
I would say 2-3 years ago, it was Tennessee was the worst. And we all remember that.
knew
And
you were gonna
Arkansas
say
fans
that.
even got mad at Vitello over that. And they were over the top. They were nuts. They were doing crazy things during their games. That's changed, and he's changed, and he was much more mellow this year. And I didn't see a lot of crazy stuff coming from Tennessee fans or Tennessee players. It's Mississippi State this year. Everybody's talking about it. They were for whatever reason, they were the guys that were doing the dugout stuff. And apparently the worst thing they did was they developed this habit of yelling out the first name of the opposing coaches. Like if it was Van Horn, they'd be, "Hey Dave, stop that," or "Hey Tony, what are you doing out there, Tony?" And Tony Vitello said, we talked about it last week, that's disrespectful. It shouldn't be done.
Disrespectful. Yeah, it is disrespectful.
So I would say right now it's Mississippi State, and then the best has always been Arkansas. Everybody will tell you that. Van Horn he tells his players, we don't want any dugout stuff.
Yeah.
We're not trying to win the upsmanship award. We're trying to win the game, and we will win with class or lose with class.
They have a lot of class, and I really appreciate Dave for that, because they have so you can see it. Even when they win, it's almost like they don't get too high with themselves. You know, they're not going and freaking out or anything. They go out, they do their celebration. It's nice. I think it's something that Dave obviously did. I think we said last week though, how would they feel about the other teams going, hey Chris, what's going on, Chris? You know, I don't know if they'd like that very much, right?
No.
No, I don't think so. Armand Abbey says, baseball has broken my heart too many times. Next year, I'm all in with Cal until basketball season is over. Until then, I'm not going to give baseball more than a passing thought.
To me, that's a black hole reaction to what we're looking at today. That's the kind of thing you don't know you expected to be dealing with baseball, and you invested in baseball for 3.5, 4 months, and now it's just, here's what will happen. He will be watching basketball, but then what will happen is Van Horn will sign a bunch of new guys, and everybody will be talking about it in fall ball, and there'll be new pitchers and new hitters, and he'll get curious, and then they'll probably be in the top 5 again, which they usually are, and then they'll start winning games at the early part of the season, and they'll be highly ranked, and then at some point he'll just get curious and start paying attention anyway.
You think that'll happen? It'll lure you back in.
They will lure you back in.
Do you know what's already happening with football, though, with some fans who came up to me and you? Remember, they were coming up and talking to us about the football season and the offensive line, and they think it's going to be better. And Eric Mateos went to speak to a local club of some sort.
Exactly.
And they're like, listen, we're getting excited about football season. I'm going, every year. It'll get you every year, right?
It'll get you.
It'll get you.
You don't have a choice. What are you going to do? Just sit around mad? You got to be, at some point, you got to adjust your thinking.
Oh, absolutely. And I tweeted out in jest that what do I have to wait? You know, what's going to hold me over until the new college football 25 game comes out? And different people were giving me different things to do. And one of them was get excited about basketball season, get excited about the upcoming football season. I'm like, guys, I just need a break, okay? Just give me 2 weeks, all right? How about that, Mike? We'll just do something fun the next 2 weeks. H.L. McCamish says, some of our fans have lost it. People calling for Van Horn to retire or get fired. What is wrong with them, Mike?
Okay, I'm going to defend those fans a little bit because they are not the extremists that you may think they are. There's a reasoning behind this, maybe the specific thing about Van Horn, but my dad explained this to me when I was in the 4th grade. That's how long ago this was. He was a newspaper man, owned the local newspaper in my hometown, went to all the games. He was a sports guy himself, an athlete and all that stuff, and he understood how athletics worked. So, a lot of fans may be familiar with the story of Bowden Wyatt at Arkansas, the 54 Little Pigs. He came in, he ran during preseason, he was so tough on these guys that they got down to 25 players. And everybody thought it was going to be a disaster, but they ended up winning the Southwest Conference. Well, 2 years after that, in my hometown, we hadn't been good in years in football. And they hired this guy, Bernard Alexander, and all the local guys called him Bernard. I don't think they could pronounce Bernard. It wasn't a B, it was a V. So it was Bernard Alexander, but they called him Bernard. That Bernard Alexander, and they didn't know much about him. So he comes in, and in preseason, everybody starts quitting. He got down to 13 guys. He had 11 starters on each. They played both sides of the ball and 2 guys on the bench, and that's what he had for the first game. All right, so the people are mad already. Then they have this hellacious rainstorm the night of the game. Nobody's going, or if they go, they get up and leave early in the game because they can't. It's just sopping wet out there. Well, I'm there with my friend Eddie Lynn Lyon, who's Eddie Lynn.
Eddie Lynn, yeah.
And we're kids. We don't care if we get wet. It was September, early September. It was kind of hot that night, so the rain cooled us off. We loved it. We got wet. We watched the game. They won, and the team they beat had beaten us 60-0 the year before. So people were shocked. Now here's the thing: the newspaper doesn't come out till the next Thursday, and so it has to be word of mouth because a bunch of those people didn't go to the game. So they didn't even know what happened, and people guys that were at the game start telling people, hey, we won. And so it takes into Monday and Tuesday of the next week to dawn on all these people around town, hey, they won that game. How did they do this? This Bernard Alexander, this Bernard guy, he must not be too bad. So the next game is Muleshoe, and I've said this before, Muleshoe and Morton, that was like Texas and Arkansas. We were smaller, we didn't beat them very often, they had better athletes, they had more athletes, but we hated their guts. So everybody shows up, and I was there, and what people were saying is, hey, maybe we can play them a lot closer this year. That's all they cared about. So the game starts, and it's a defensive battle. And it gets into the fourth quarter, and it's 0-0. Now fans are starting to say, because it was a non-conference game, there would be no overtime or anything like that. There'd be no using stats to determine a winner. There'd just be a tie game. And I heard all kinds of people going, well, it'd be a tie game. Then Muleshoe won't beat us. It'll be a tie game. So we got the ball. I'm on the north end of the field with Eddie. Morton's on the south end, and they're coming toward us. And we got this old-timey scoreboard with the dial clock. It didn't have the digital numbers. It was like looking at a clock. And you're looking at that, and it looked like about 2 minutes, and we get the ball, and we're coming up the field, and we get a first down and another first down. We go across midfield, and I told Eddie, I turned to him and said, we're going to run out of time before we don't have time to score. And he says, good, it'll be a tie. And so we're sitting there. They get down to the 6-yard line. There's 43 seconds left. You might think you'd kick a field goal there. We're on the 6-yard line. They didn't have a field goal kicker. Their field goal kicker quit. Their holder quit. They didn't have anybody that could hold a kick. They didn't have anybody that could kick.
No.
The first game of the year that they won, they went for 2 on both touchdowns and made it on one and didn't on the other. They didn't have a kicker. So he calls timeout. And he comes out there and they dial up a sweep. They dial up a swoop. Ooh.
That was on cue.
They dialed up a sweep. So, and it's a sweep to where we are because we're over there on the northwest corner of the end zone. And they come around the corner, and here's what I see. You got a full house backfield. So you got a lead. Well, first of all, you got your tight end blocking down on the defensive end. Then you got the lead halfback comes out and takes out a cornerback. Yeah. Then you got the quarterback, and he comes out and takes out a safety. And here comes Eddie Thompson with the ball, and I'm watching him maneuver through all these guys. And so I'm thinking he's going to score, but then a linebacker from the other side and a safety from the other side come over, and they're right at the goal line. And he gets to the 4-yard line and just dives with the ball like this, with it stuck out. Kind of like what K.J. Jefferson did that time.
Yes, yeah.
He hits them helmet to helmet. Pow, pow. Their 2 helmets and his helmet. We didn't know it at the time, but it knocked him out. Somehow his head went above theirs. They hit him a little lower on the helmet. So he goes over them, and because he's got his hands like this, the ball goes over. They didn't have a pylon in those days. They had a little flag on a little twirly thing that was made out of metal that would move in any direction. And when his hand came down, it touched that, and it moved. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if he was out of bounds or scored or what. Well, ref signals touchdown. There's 30 seconds left, and we've won the game. There's no way they're going to go down and score in 30 seconds. Everybody's celebrating, but we look down, and Eddie's face down. We thought he was dead or something.
Oh my gosh.
They flip him over. He's unconscious. Here comes Dr. Monk, and he's got his bag, and he gets his bag out, and he takes this ammonia capsule, and he pops it under his nose, and he kind of comes to, and they pick him up, and they carry him off the field. Okay. At that moment, he's a hero, but Bernard,
Bernard.
he's a hero too, because now they love this guy. They hated him before, he was crazy, but now he's a great guy. So my dad goes over, and they had a really good season, and my dad goes over to interview him, and he takes me with him because I like to go there, and I would just sit there and be quiet when he interviewed people. So we get over there. First thing I notice, in the driveway, his wife has a new station wagon. The guy that owned the Ford dealership donated the car at a lower cost, and then the Booster Club paid for the rest of it, and his wife had a brand new station wagon. Wow. So I'm going, wow. Then we go inside, and old Werner says, hey, why don't you go, he had a kid that was about 2 years younger, why don't you go in that bedroom, he's got something he wants to show you. So I go in there, there's this table that was built, and it's just his height, so he can stand up and look. And he had the coolest train set I've ever seen in my life. I don't know where they got this thing. It had a tunnel, the train had a light on it, so it goes through the tunnel and lights, and then it would come around and pull into this stockyard looking thing with these cattle, and then they had this little belt that would lower them down in, and they would go into the cattle cars, and you could go off with the cattle, and then you could unload them. We did that for about an hour while my dad's talking to this guy. And I'm thinking, and when we left, I said, hey, you need to be a coach because I want to get one of these train sets. And Mom needs a new car. And he's laughing. He said, well, coaching's not everything you think it is, but I thought it was cool. Okay, so the next year, they weren't quite as good, and people were kind of getting mad. The next year, they only won 3 games. Ooh. They fired him. They fired him, and I couldn't believe it. So my dad goes back over there. He's going to interview him again, only this time it's not because of how good he is, it's because he got fired. And we get out of the car, and there's that station wagon, and it don't look cool anymore. It's got some dents in it, and it's scratched up a little bit, and they got it all loaded with stuff on the roof. And I'm thinking, ugh, and it's dirty, and everything. So we go in the house, and I want to see the train set one last time. I go in there, and it's gone. There's a table there, but no train set. And I was just like, oh, this is awful. So we get home, and I asked my dad at supper, I said, why would they fire this guy when they liked him just 2 years ago? And he said, he created expectations. And expectations are great, but they can also come back and bite you because he said fans can't influence anything. They're sitting up there in the stands. They can't draw up a play. They can't make you better. They can't get on the field and play. They're helpless and hopeless, and the only thing they can do is get mad, and that's what they do. And that's what's going on with Arkansas fans. They can't do anything about this. They can't change the hitting philosophy. They can't fire or hire an assistant coach. Anything they think that will make this team better, they can't do any of that. So they're just sitting there. But what do you want? Do you want a fan base that just goes, oh, you know what? We won the West, and we were a 5 seed, and that's pretty cool. At a lot of schools, they love that. Yeah, at a lot of schools, they would. Do you want to be one of those schools where that's what the expectation is? It's what you talked about. Yeah. Or do you want to be at a place where people expect you to win? And if they expect you to win, that should drive you to win. So I understand these fans. I will not criticize them for what they're saying because I understand it. Now, I want to flash forward a little bit further. Now I'm in high school. Had the good year when I was a junior. We've talked about it before. Not very good when I'm a senior. All these old guys around town are making fun of us, yelling at us. Oh, you guys are lazy. You're not practicing hard. And I'm getting mad, you know, and I'm told raised not to talk back to adults, but I told my dad, I said, I'm going to pop one of these guys one of these days. I'm going to let him say stuff to me that's not true. And he said, you can solve that problem very easily. And I said, how is that? And he said, quit the team, get up in the stands, and be with the rest of us. He said, there's not one person up there that doesn't want to be you or doesn't want to be those coaches because you get to influence things. You can do something. They're stuck, and they want to be you, and they're not you, so they're doing the only thing they can do. And if you don't want that pressure, then don't play. And I say that Van Horn is like that. The players are like that. You have a choice. Nobody makes you play. Nobody tells you that if you do play, it's going to be all roses. They may just be all over you. You have to be willing to accept that. What about Carson Shaddy? How do you think he feels being the guy that dropped that ball, and all these years later, people are talking about it? It's terrible. I wouldn't want to have to deal with that. But he has to because he chose to play. And I guarantee if you ask him, he's still glad that he played. Yeah. He's still glad that he was in that game. He wishes it was different. But you have to come to grips with that sort of thing as a coach or a player. You just have to understand that's what it is. And you have a choice. Don't coach, don't play, and then you can be up in the stands being a jerk, or you can be down on the field and be one of those guys, and they may be mad at you, and I mean, Will McIntyre, watching him cry yesterday, and you see how hard this affected him, and you feel bad for him. But I guarantee you, 2 weeks from now, a year from now, he'll still say that was some of the best stuff I ever did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he even said it in the press conference, right? He said, this past 5 years have been the best 5 years of my life. I've made lifelong friends. I've done everything I've wanted to do. It was hard in that moment because that is not how any of those guys wanted it to end. But you know that they're going to look back on this and think, man, that was a great time of my life. That was a great time.
That's the way I look at this.
All right.
Don't get so mad when people say that. Understand why they do it, and don't feel sorry for coaches and players. They understand what they're doing. They understand what they're doing, and they're mature enough to deal with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, my dad talked to me all the time when I was little. I said, Dad, how do you handle all the people that want you fired? And he goes, it's a part of the job.
It is.
And that's what he told me
You
when
can't do it if you don't have that philosophy.
Exactly. It's a part of the job. Those people are part of the job, and they sign up for that. I mean, that's a part of our job as well, right?
Well, we don't have it as bad as they do.
Oh, we don't. But people come and criticize us too.
They
but
do.
It's part of the job, right?
I mean, I've never said, people on social media, I'm just going to not be on social media anymore. I'm going to quit my job. They won't be taking any more shots at me.
Yeah, no.
I don't care. I
No,
really
know.
don't.
That's why you're still doing this. How long have you been doing this, Mike? 45 years?
At Arkansas, 48.
See?
This will complete 48 years.
There you go.
I might go 50.
You better go 50. I know the fans want you to go 50, okay?
Maybe.
You promise? Shake on it?
Depends on how I feel in 2 years. I may run out of gas.
Well, I hope you're around for a long, long time, Mike. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.